Dallas, Texas, August 1983. The summer heat pressed down on the city like a weight, but inside the Bronco Bowl venue, the air was electric with a different kind of tension. 15,000 people packed into that space, shoulder to shoulder, all waiting to witness something they'd never forget. Young Diamond Darrell Abbott stood backstage, his hands wrapped around the neck of his Dean ML, the lightning bolt shape catching the dim lights of the corridor. He was 17 years old, and everyone in that building knew his name. He'd won every major guitar competition in Texas for the past 3 years. But tonight was different. Tonight, there was someone else in the building who could match him, note for note, and what happened in the next 3 hours would haunt Dimebag Darrell for decades, reshape his reputation in ways no one could predict, and create a legend that the metal world would whisper about long after the stage lights went dark. Before we dive deeper into this story, if you want to hear more untold tales about Dimebag Darrell and the legends of metal, hit that subscribe button. These are the stories that changed rock history forever. The competition that night wasn't just another local showcase. This was the Texas Metal Showdown, an annual event that drew the best guitarists from across the Southwest. The winner would receive $5,000, an endorsement deal with Dean Guitars, and most importantly, the right to claim they were the fastest, most technically proficient guitarist in the state. Diamond Darrell had won this competition twice before, in 1981 and 1982. His father, Jerry Abbott, a country music producer who'd worked with some of Nashville's biggest names, had trained both Diamond and his brother Vinnie Paul since they were children. Jerry believed in discipline, in practice, in perfection. He'd wake Diamond at 5 in the morning to run scales before school. He'd make him play until his fingers bled, then tape them up and make him play some more. That kind of training created a guitarist who could shred with supernatural speed and precision. The rival that night was a guitarist named Marcus Hendricks. Very few people remember that name now, and there's a reason for that. Marcus had come up from Houston, bringing with him a reputation that had been growing steadily over the past year. He played a modified Stratocaster, cherry red with gold hardware, that he'd customized himself. Word on the street was that Marcus had been studying Diamond Darrell's techniques, watching bootleg videos of his performances, learning his signature moves, and then building on them. Some people said Marcus was faster than Diamond. Others said he had better tone, better stage presence, better everything. The Houston metal scene had been talking trash about Dallas for months. This wasn't just a competition anymore. This was regional pride. This was blood sport dressed up as musical entertainment. Diamond Darrell stood in the corridor leading to the stage, rolling his shoulders, his fingers moving through silent scales on the neck of his guitar, even though it wasn't plugged in. Vinnie Paul stood next to him, arms crossed, watching his younger brother with the protective intensity that would define their relationship for the next 2 decades. Vinnie understood his role in the family dynamic. He was the foundation, the steady presence that allowed Diamond's pyrotechnics to soar. He was also the enforcer, the one who would step between Diamond and anyone who threatened him. That night, Vinnie sensed something was wrong. He could see it in the way Diamond's jaw was clenched, in the slight tremor in his brother's hands that had nothing to do with nervousness and everything to do with rage. But what happened 20 minutes before the competition started would transform this musical showcase into a moment that defined how the metal community viewed fairness, integrity, and the unwritten codes that governed their world. Diamond had been warming up in the practice room, a converted storage space behind the main stage where competitors could plug in and get their sound ready. The room was small, barely large enough for 2 people, with foam padding on the walls to dampen the sound. Diamond had been working through a difficult sweep-picking pattern when he heard voices in the hallway outside. The door was slightly ajar, and through the gap, he could see two figures talking in low, urgent tones. One of them was Marcus Hendricks. The other was a man Diamond recognized as one of the competition judges, a music store owner from Fort Worth named Dale Reinhardt, who had a reputation for playing favorites. Diamond stopped playing and moved closer to the door, careful not to make any noise. Marcus was asking specific questions about how the technical scoring worked, how much weight was given to speed versus melody, whether improvisation counted more than prepared pieces. Dale was answering, giving him information that none of the other competitors had access to. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came when Dale said, "Look, between you and me, I'm tired of the Abbott kid winning every year. His father's been pushing him on everyone in the Texas scene. It's time someone took him down a notch. You just focus on your speed runs in the technical section. That's worth 40% of the total score. And that's where I can give you the edge." Diamond stood frozen in the practice room, his guitar hanging from his shoulder strap, his mind processing what he'd just heard. This wasn't just a competition anymore. This was rigged. One of the judges had already decided the outcome before a single note was played. For a 17-year-old who'd sacrificed everything for his craft, who'd played until his fingers bled and calloused over, who'd turned down dates and parties and normal teenage experiences because he was too busy practicing. This revelation felt like betrayal. Diamond's first instinct was to storm out there and confront them both, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the calculating part of his mind that understood confrontation wouldn't solve anything, that accusations without proof would just make him look like a sore loser making excuses before the competition even started. What Diamond Darrell decided to do in that moment would become the foundation of a reputation that would follow him through his entire career. A reputation for being not just a virtuoso guitarist, but something that made other musicians respect him, fear him, and tell stories about him for the next 20 years. Marcus Hendricks took the stage at 9:30, and from the first note, it was clear he'd come prepared. His technical showcase was a blur of sweep picking, tapping, and lightning-fast alternate picking that had the crowd roaring approval. He moved across the fretboard with fluid confidence that comes from knowing you're operating at the absolute peak of your abilities. His melodic piece was a haunting minor key composition that showcased his vibrato and his ability to make the guitar sing. When Marcus finished, the applause was thunderous. He bowed, his cherry-red Stratocaster catching the stage lights, and walked off with the kind of satisfied smile that said he knew he'd just delivered a performance that would be hard to beat. Diamond watched from the wings, his face expressionless, his fingers still moving through silent exercises on his unplugged guitar. Vinny stood next to him, and without looking at his brother, Diamond said quietly, "I heard Dale talking to him earlier. It's fixed." Vinny's jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything. Both brothers had inherited their father's competitive streak, but they'd also learned something else from Jerry Abbott. In a rigged game, you don't complain about the rules. You change how the game is played. Vinny asked, "What are you going to do?" Diamond was silent for a moment, watching Marcus accept congratulations from the crowd. Then he said, "I'm going to make them watch something they'll never forget." When Diamond Darrell walked onto that stage, the crowd's energy shifted. There was a familiarity to their cheers, the sound of people welcoming back a champion they'd seen dominate before. But there was also an undercurrent of anticipation, a sense that something unusual was about to happen. Diamond didn't acknowledge the applause. He walked to center stage, plugged in his Dean ML, and stood there for a moment in silence, letting the tension build. Then, instead of launching into his prepared technical showcase, he did something no one expected. He started to speak. "Before I play tonight," Diamond said, his Texas accent carrying clearly through the sound system, "I want to talk about something that matters more than winning. I want to talk about what it means to be a musician." The crowd quieted, confused by this departure from the competition format. Diamond continued, "I've been playing guitar since I was 12 years old. My dad taught me that the only thing that matters is being the best. He taught me that talent and hard work will always win out. He taught me that music is pure, that when you get on stage, all the nonsense falls away, and the only thing left is what you can do with your instrument." He paused, his eyes scanning the crowd, then settling for just a moment on where Dale Reinhardt sat in the judges' row. "I used to believe that. But tonight I learned something different. I learned that sometimes the game is rigged before you even step on stage." The venue went dead silent. 15,000 people held their breath. Backstage, Marcus Hendricks froze. In the judges' row, Dale Reinhardt's face went pale. And in that moment, Diamond Darrell made a choice that would echo through the metal world for decades. Instead of calling out the corruption directly, Diamond said, "So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to play tonight like none of that matters. I'm going to play like the only thing in this world is the music. And I'm going to let everyone in this room decide if what they heard before was better than what they're about to hear now. Not the judges. You." He pointed to the crowd. "Because you're the ones who matter. You're the ones who buy the records and come to the shows. So this performance isn't for them." He gestured toward the judges' table. "It's for you." What happened next became the stuff of legend. Diamond Darrell proceeded to deliver a performance that people who were there still talk about 4 decades later. His technical showcase wasn't just fast, it was surgical. Every note crystal clear, even at impossible speeds. But more than the technical mastery, there was emotion in every phrase, an anger and determination that came through the amplifier like a living thing. He wasn't just playing notes, he was making a statement. He was declaring that talent couldn't be suppressed by corruption, that real skill would always shine through. His melodic piece was a soaring composition that had people in the crowd openly crying. And his improvisation was so creative and unexpected that even the other competitors backstage stopped what they were doing to listen. But the moment that truly defined that night came after Diamond finished his official performance. According to the competition rules, he should have unplugged and walked off stage. Instead, he stayed there, guitar still plugged in, and he spoke again. "Marcus Hendricks," he called out, "that was an incredible performance you gave. You're one of the best guitarists I've ever seen." The crowd murmured, confused. Diamond continued, "But I have a question for you. What's a competition worth if it's not fair? What does winning mean if someone's decided the outcome before the music even started?" The venue erupted. Not in cheers, but in shouts and arguments, people demanding to know what Diamond was talking about. The organizers tried to regain control, but Diamond wasn't finished. He said, "I'm not asking the judges to answer. I'm asking Marcus. Did you earn that performance honestly, or did someone give you an advantage?" The spotlight swung to where Marcus stood in the wings, and suddenly 15,000 pairs of eyes were looking at him. What Marcus Hendricks did next shocked everyone, and it would set in motion events that would ripple through the Texas metal scene for years. Marcus stepped out onto the stage. He stood 10 feet from Diamond, and for a long moment, The two guitarists just looked at each other. Then Marcus spoke. "Yeah," he said simply. "Someone told me things. Things about the judging criteria. Things that helped me prepare." The crowd's reaction was immediate and intense. Dale Reinhardt stood up from the judges' table, trying to leave, but the crowd blocked his path. Marcus continued. "But here's the thing, Diamond. I didn't need that advantage. Everything you just heard me play tonight, I earned that. I'm good enough to beat you on my own." Then Marcus said something that would become almost as legendary as Diamond's performance. "So here's what I propose. Forget the judges, forget the competition format. Let's just play. You and me right now, no rules, no scoring, just two guitars. We'll trade solos until one of us can't keep up. Winner gets to claim they're the best." The venue went absolutely insane. Diamond looked at Marcus, and for the first time that night, he smiled. "Let's go," he said. What happened over the next 40 minutes became Texas metal mythology. Diamond and Marcus traded solos, each one trying to outdo the other, pushing the boundaries of speed, technique, and creativity. Diamond would unleash a blistering run of arpeggios, and Marcus would respond with an equally impressive display of tapping. The crowd was in a frenzy, divided between supporters of each guitarist. Vinnie Paul watched from the side of the stage, arms crossed, a smile on his face because he knew his brother had prepared something special. And then, 30 minutes into the duel, Diamond Darrell unveiled a technique that would become his signature move, the thing that guitarists would try to copy for the next 2 decades. Diamond's fingers moved high on the neck, and he began playing harmonics. But these weren't natural harmonics. These were squealing, screaming notes that sounded like a combination of a guitar and a synthesizer, created through precise pick attack and controlled feedback. The sound was unlike anything anyone in that venue had heard before. It was aggressive and melodic at the same time, technically demanding but also deeply musical. Even Marcus Hendricks stopped playing for a moment, staring at Diamond with an expression that mixed disbelief with reverence. When Diamond finished, the silence lasted perhaps 2 seconds before the venue erupted. Marcus walked across the stage and held out his hand to Diamond. The two guitarists shook hands while 15,000 people watched, and Marcus said something the crowd couldn't hear. But Diamond heard it clearly. "You earned it, man. That was the best playing I've ever seen." The judges had no choice but to score honestly. Diamond Darrell won by the largest margin in the competition's history. But what mattered more was the respect he'd earned from his fellow musicians. Dale Reinhardt was quietly removed from the judging panel and never worked another competition in Texas. The aftermath of that night would shape Diamond Darrell's approach to his career in ways that became clear over the next 2 decades. Within weeks, the story had spread throughout the Southwest music scene. The lesson Diamond took away wasn't that the industry was corrupt. The lesson was that talent and integrity could overcome corruption if you were willing to make your case publicly and back it up with undeniable skill. This philosophy would guide him through the formation of Pantera, through the decision to abandon glam metal and embrace the aggressive groove metal sound that would make them famous. The harmonic squeal technique became one of his signature sounds. It appeared on Pantera's breakthrough album Cowboys from Hell, particularly in songs like Cemetery Gates. Guitar magazines tried to analyze how he achieved the sound, but no one could quite replicate it with the same musicality and control. That kind of mastery could only be earned through obsessive dedication. Marcus Hendricks never achieved the same level of fame as Pantera, but he built a solid career as a session musician. In a later interview, he was asked about that night, and he said, "I came to that competition thinking I could win with help, I left understanding that real excellence can't be faked. Diamond showed me what it meant to be a true musician. As we reach the end of this story, it's worth considering what that night represents in the larger context of Dimebag Darrell's legacy. The 15,000 people who froze that night were witnessing something that transcended a guitar competition. They were seeing a young musician make a choice about what kind of artist he wanted to be. Diamond Darrell chose integrity, and that choice defined him for the rest of his life. It's why fans loved him. It's why other musicians respected him. It's why his influence extended far beyond his technical ability. In the end, what happened that night wasn't about beating Marcus Hendricks. It was about Diamond Darrell establishing his identity as an artist, demonstrating that excellence combined with integrity creates something more powerful than either quality alone. That's why they froze. That's why the story endured. That's why, decades later, people still talk about the night Diamond Darrell refused to let corruption diminish his art.